my whole goal was to discuss, like, growing up, you know, I was trained with weightlifting where, you know, I snatched, I learned how to clean, I learned how to do jerks. And, you know, we sort of touched on this in your podcast, but it's like you come up and you're either a weightlifter or you're a power lifter, and now you're a CrossFitter or you're a bodybuilder. And one of the things that I wanted to say was, or ask you, was because you came from more of a powerlifting background. You know, if I set up a program or a day of training, I will have like I call it technical coordination, so like a snatch or a clean, and then we do absolute strength work. But that coordination work could entail force development, explosiveness, anything along those lines. So my whole question was going to be maybe not even so much weightlifting versus powerlifting, but how do you replace that in a powerlifting setup or in your condensed conjugate where it's like, all right, let's do some explosive work?
Yeah, I mean, we utilize a lot of the landmines like we do. You know, it just depends on what's the focus. You know, with powerlifting, the dynamic effort work that we do for conjugate, and people can say what they say about conjugate, but at the end of the day, the goal is to either improve on the weight on the bar and lift maximal loads in the meet. And if a guy is, you know, stronger than he is fast, and we need to improve on his dynamic capabilities, then we'll utilize things in a higher velocity to allow that to happen. Now, with the specific movements inside of powerlifting, you got the squat, bench, and deadlift, you can use supplemental lifts in that same world to still work the specific velocities that are conducive to something like an Olympic lift, right?
So what would you do then for like your fighters? Like if you know, let's use an example. I think I've even seen this. I'm stealing this probably directly from your YouTube channel, but it's like seeing guys do like jumps with a trap bar. Would that be like a good example of where you take a fighter and to do a dynamic effort movement, that's what you're going to do?
Yeah. I mean, it really just depends on the speed on the bar.
Okay.
Right? So you can use, you know, linear transducers or velocity-based trainers to help with that, to understand that, or you can use the specific percentages based upon what speed or what that explosive power percentage would be, right? Olympic lifting now, this is something I want to ask you from a percentage-based perspective. What is the speed on the bar for, let's say, a maximal effort power clean?
So like, I would say, so max effort probably would be right like 0.8 to a meter per second.
Okay, perfect. So that's pretty much dynamic effort.
Yeah.
You know, so we would use accommodated resistance to allow for compensatory acceleration to occur, so we don't have to slow down the bar path.
So bands or chains?
Bands and chains, really more bands than anything, because you get that overspeed.
Okay.
And the accommodated resistance. So we like to use that so that the athletes don't really have to think too much. We want to eliminate the overthinking, especially because of the fact that Olympic lifting is a sport in itself. And you can use that sport to get better in your sport, but that's not the goal. You know what I mean? The goal is to get bigger, stronger, faster.
You're supplementing the whole main goal of, in your case, mostly fighting, boxing, football.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, so for me, it's like, all right, what can we do to utilize whatever sport to get that stimulus adaptation that is going to correlate over to that particular sport, right?
So would you say even using bands, like, I'm thinking like if I do a squat or a front squat even, or a Zercher, if I've got bands hooked up and it's pulling me back down, that would be, like that could, in theory, be similar to when you would be catching like a clean at the top.
Yeah.
Maybe not exactly, but it's going to have a similar transfer.
Well, yeah, you got to put yourself down into that position, right? In order to get underneath the bar. Same concept. You get the stretch shortening cycle worked on. That really depends on what you're doing. Like a deadlift, you're not obviously doing that. We're going to do singles with the deadlift, so it's a pure concentric motion. And sometimes I may eliminate the eccentric based upon where they're at in their fight camp.
Yeah, so if they're 2 weeks out, would that be where?
No, we would take that completely out.
Okay.
If anything, would be all isometric, like, you know, isometric or contrast sets. We use maximal isometrics or concentric isometric, and then go right into an explosive movement.
Okay.
So it could be a counter movement jump, it could be something of that nature, but we're not trying to overload the eccentric.
Right. So actually, I did have a question about this. This is getting a little off the weightlifting questions and powerlifting question, but if you're training somebody with a contrast method where they would do a squat, let's say a squat double, and then they go do a jump, like a bound or whatever, how long do you think, so I know that like, so science will tell you wait 2 to 3 minutes and you'll get the best response. But I think about your case with fighters, and it's like, there might be a point in the fight where they have, like, I'm even looking at that D-ball you have over there. It's like you're holding a 100-pound medicine ball. You do 5 squats, you drop it, and you might have to react quickly. So is it really the power output that you're training, or is it?
No, it's power endurance.
Yeah, power endurance.
Power endurance getting closer to the fight. So like when we do any type, like let's say we do French or we do potentiation clusters, right? The goal there is to increase work capacity but sustain power outputs and repeated power outputs.
Okay.
So we're just using like those contrast methods to still induce, all right, motor unit recruitment is going to be there, but are we getting maximal explosive power? Obviously not, because we're not able to recover as much. It's an incomplete rest.
Right.
But
that might not be the quality that you're looking for.
That may not be. If a guy has conditioning, then we may have to work on their ability to produce that power in isolated fashions. So I may give them that rest period. And a lot of the times, these guys are conditioned. They don't have that maximal power output a lot of the time, not all the time. Or you have the opposite, where the guys like heavyweights, we know they can produce power, we know they're strong, but now we got to increase their power and endurance like you just did.
Right. Yeah, I don't know if I did that. I think I died with my power endurance.
That's true. I give you that. I was waiting on the throw up, and I was waiting on the
dude, it's still sitting right here, right here at the top. One more thing. That's so funny. I was such a bitch on that third rep. Oh, one more question before we close out.
You're supposed to do 5, by the way.
And 2 in, I was like, can we just do 3? I hope my kids don't watch this. So I guess one final question I had is, a lot of coaches, high school coaches, strength coaches that have gyms, that are, almost like an underground gym like this, or, like that tough gym feeling. They'll ask that question like, okay, if I want to have the best football players at the high school level, what lift should we do? If I want to have the best wrestlers or the best swimmers, whatever it is. But a lot of people, like you even talked about this a little bit with Ian, he's Irish, right? The Irish fighter who's basically only ever done MMA. Yeah. Just had his first fight in the UFC, I think it was, won. So my question is if you have guys now coming up and they hit you up, you have a 15-year-old and he's like, I want to be a UFC champ. What type of training do you recommend doing outside of buying your stuff off your website, but also would it be like, just work on getting stronger at this point?
Well, yeah, I mean, it starts with the assessment protocol. Like we got to see exactly what we're working with here, injury history too as well, health history, that's another thing. Yeah. And then go from there. Like we start from the inside out. Okay. So I want to make sure that they're healthy for one, their heart's pumping the right amount of blood, right? Yeah. And their lungs are working properly.
Is that what you were saying to me on that last set?
Something like that. Yeah. Something. It wasn't happening for you. But like we just want the ability to have a strong heart, strong lungs, have movement capabilities. Yep. We want to try to eliminate as much asymmetry as possible. I know that's almost impossible because there's going to be somewhat of asymmetry, but we want them to be competent in movement strategies, and then from there we want to see what their joint prerequisites are, like what is the positions that they can get in safely without load before we load them, and then I can put together a program based upon that. So it is individualized. Right. We follow a method, and I have the condensed conjugate model that I've been working with just because of my circumstances and situations that I've had. I do like a concurrent style just because with my guys, they always have to be ready. And so there is no seasons really. They're training and competing all the way through the years. Like if you had, a sport like yourself where you have those seasons, you have that time, you can do something more, maybe like a block style or something of that nature. For me though, these guys have to be ready and they have to work all these systems. The good thing is that, we're utilizing all these things and we're taking it to like, if I were to put it in place of like a stereo, right? I'm turning up the treble, I'm turning up the bass, I'm turning up the volume, or I may have to turn down the bass and turn up the volume, and
depending on the guy,
playing with it, right? So there's still, everything's being worked, but there's a focus point between each time frame. Okay, that makes perfect sense. So you heard it here. Go to phildaru.com. You can pick up one of his strength training programs. He's one of the best strength coaches in the entire world, and I would say the best MMA strength coach on the planet. Until next time, guys, peace. Thanks, Phil. That was good. Perfect.